I'm Zach Rinsell from the Wellington City Council. Nice to meet you. One thing that's really important to me in my personal energy life is actually my commute. And I try extremely hard to not use my car on a day-to-day commuting basis. My problem is, I guess where I can really improve is, I've lived in Wellington for now since 2003, and I've never owned a bicycle. And I'm actually quite heavily involved in climate change mitigation. So it's a bit tragic that I've actually never attempted to get fit, save more money, and actually get more congestion off the roads by taking the personal challenge of cycling.
I live in Oxford as well as working in Oxford, and I live in a fairly large house in suburban Oxford. And I came into energy research almost by accident, though not quite perhaps. The first time I ever thought about energy use was when I was a student in a north-facing bedroom in Edinburgh, and I kept warm by feeding 10-pence pieces into a coin meter. And in the winter you had to get through quite a lot of those in order to keep warm. I think that was the first time I had to think about it.
Four young girls at the moment, and Easter, well, over the holidays we went on a retreat which was about climate change, and yesterday we started to talk about those issues, and I think it's the first time that it's started to really bring home that this stuff is really important for me. So I guess things that I'm not proud of, well, it's like, yeah, I mean, actually having 4 kids.
And that's also very interesting. It's because you have the children and you have the life, and you don't want to spoil your time all the time with this kind of stuff. So the consumption went back up again, and I leave it as it is. So it went up about 10% again, and I'm not going to do anything about it.
In terms of my own personal energy story, I have Raynaud's, which is a circulatory disorder, which means that in any amount of coolth, I can lose circulation on the end of my fingers, and they go white and blue. So I'm particularly susceptible to cold, as you might imagine, living in London. But despite this, I'd make a very big attempt to layer up in lots of stuff for winter, so that I'm not having to have the heating turned up high. So I keep the heating. It's probably turned up higher than a lot of people might need, but I'm still wearing about the maximum amount that I possibly can wear when I'm inside.
When I was younger, for about 5 years I lived off-grid, and that was not because I intended to, it was because we just happened to live in a place that was beyond the end of the electricity lines. So we had a lot of fun, I guess. When you're young enough, you can cope with these things. But you know, wood-fired cooking, a little bit of gas we brought in, but also we put in our own Pelton wheel and had our own 12-volt electricity. I mean, that didn't set my life on course to be an electricity specialist or an energy specialist, but somehow, full circle, my life's come back into energy again now.
Ever since I was young, especially since my dad got an off-grid house, I've wanted PV around my roof. I want to heat my hot water. I want to generate some power. I like some energy security tanks. I'd like some batteries underneath the house. And this is tens of thousands of dollars of investment. And so first I was a renter in the worst insulated house ever. And the roof was leaking, so let's install some installation. It'll go us about 2 years before the insulation rots.
A more personal side of the things I could be doing much better are being originally from the US. I had never dried any of my clothes anywhere but a dryer. And so I'm slowly forcing myself into, but on my own test case for how you get someone to make this transition. And my approach was actually drying one thing at a time, not in the dryer. So I started just drying jeans on the rack because they were the slowest to dry, and it's sort of slowly getting myself more comfortable with the idea of not drying clothes in the dryer. For the moment, at the very end, I still put them back in the dryer for like 10 minutes, crisp them up a little bit. But I'm almost there.
I am an energy efficiency professional, and I have very strong environmental values. In fact, probably the strongest value that I have is to be green and to be sustainable. So I obviously know a lot about it. I've worked in policy, I've worked in implementation, I've done the research, and you know, I mean, I'm also earning good enough money, and I own my own house. So, you know, I should be what is basically regarded as, you know, a dark green. So even in a social segmentation, I should be exactly at this, you know, super green element of, you know, really sustainable lifestyles and who does everything right. And then when I look at myself, I find that I am quite far removed from that ideal.
My name is Ruud Maurik. I'm an energy expert. I've been working in the energy field for more than 10 years. And I have a very big energy sin. My home is fully insulated. I have solar panels on the roof. All the electricity and the gas that we are buying or purchasing is so-called green energy. However, that doesn't mean that our consumption is actually a very sustainable consumption. We have, I think, more than 4,000 kilowatt hours a year, which is quite a lot, even for a family of 4. And I blame my husband partly for it, because we have solar panels on the roof, but that meant that we would be able to have a bigger widescreen television, of course.
I think my biggest sin is taking showers every evening. I try not to shower too long, but yeah, I think you can see it as a practice. It's something that I wash off the day before I go to sleep. If I don't do it, I often don't sleep well. So I could try to change that, but then I have to find something to replace that. Maybe a glass of wine, but yeah, like now I have a headache, so I don't know if that's a good solution.
I stopped eating meat, live in a small apartment, I don't have a car. But there's still one thing that destroys all my energy efforts, and that's all the flying I have to do in my job. So, which is the one thing that I do not enjoy about my work, and that I can't get away from. So I'm really hoping for some better teleconference technology to come along and save us from having to fly around as much as we do.
I don't fly as much as I can, so I've flown once in the last 5 years and haven't flown long haul for probably 10 years, so that's my big, as you can probably tell, my big thing.
I use public transport. Living in Wellington, it's a fantastic place for public transport, very easy. I suppose the downside of that and the negative side of that is that I actually still quite like cars. And so I own the 3-litre V6 sports car, which is absolutely ridiculous. A vehicle I certainly don't need in this city, but I just like it.
The car I'm driving, that's a bit old-fashioned. Okay, let me say this. People want to, my colleagues wanted to put a sticker on it saying that it's a very polluting car.
I have a horse, and a horse in itself, of course, is not very sustainable, but my horse is not near my home, so I need to drive to my horse, and it gets even worse. The car that I drive is not a small car or a hybrid car. It's a big van, transporter van. And the excuse that I have for having this car, which is not very sustainable, of course, is that sometimes I need to actually drive my horse to another place to ride my horse in a beautiful, sustainable environment like the forest.
I got a hobby. I'm a scuba diver and I have to move my gear around. So my car is too big, it uses too much diesel. That is my not green part. Otherwise, I try to be as green as possible. I do a lot of my travels by public transport, which is a kind of a fight in the Netherlands, but I win.
I've worked in this industry since 1967, which is a few years ago, and in the last probably 15 years I've moved from just a supply side focus of life to say, well, what is it that we as people are doing on the demand side? So I've moved from being a chief executive of an electricity company to going on to the other side and looking at eco as all about what we can do to save energy. So when I looked at what I could do, I thought, well, transport is my biggest thing. Not only does it consume or produce a lot of carbon, but also it costs me a lot of money. So the first thing I did when I came to IEA was I got rid of my fantastic 8-cylinder German car and thought about a country where they're more efficient and got a diesel car. And that cut by a third my energy consumption and my carbon emission.
When I was living in Plymouth with my wife, we bought a Prius because even though it was really expensive, there's a decision that we made that it was really important if we were going to get a car, because we never had one before, that it had to be the most energy efficient one available. So we did a lot of research and eventually bought it. But partly the thinking behind it was being a kind of early adopter and using kind of innovation theory, I suppose, in a way, or understandings of innovation as a way of saying, okay, I can make this car cheaper for somebody in the future, so that means it'll get more use, and B, also kind of setting norms as well and sort of demonstrating that these kinds of cars are good to have. So it was, I was kind of trying to live true to my principles there.
I don't drive a particularly energy efficient car, and I'm really conscious of that, being a sustainability manager. I don't drive much because I live over there in Eastbourne, and I catch that ferry and I work right there. I don't know if you can see that in the camera, but so I catch the ferry to work in the morning, and that involves being on a boat in the morning, which makes me very happy, especially when there are dolphins, and it drops me right outside my office.
My energy story is that I am so lucky. I live in the city of Winterthur, right in the town centre, and I work in Winterthur as well. I play volleyball in Winterthur, and I attend a choir in Winterthur, so all my leisure time and my working time is in Winterthur. I go everywhere with the bike, so I think this one is a good example for an energy efficient and healthy lifestyle.
So when my kids were teenagers, they got the car, I did everything by bike. And I had ways of carrying up to 30 or 40 kilogram on my bike, and I did all my shopping by bike. I had a real reputation. I used to bike into town. And then I buggered my back, so I couldn't sit down for 2 to 3 years. My back was fixed. I realized that I could sit down now, I could learn to sail. Taught myself to sail in big waves in a small boat. Absolutely unparalleled excitement. Bought a yacht, 30-foot keelboat. I now have an all-women's crew. I take beginners. I prefer people who have never sailed. And we won the Lowry Bay Cruising Division Season Championship last year with my slogan, energy efficiency is fun.
Because of the challenge of trying to reduce the carbon, I realised that actually I could walk over our fields to work. It would take me about the same amount of time as driving in a car. And lo and behold, I had an extra half an hour where I can really start thinking. So actually there are additional benefits which came along which I wasn't expecting. Walking in the rain wasn't brilliant, but that was, one sees Oxford in a different light when one goes through the rain. So that was fine.
That I do, which I think is important in terms of energy use, and more people should actually consider for a range of sort of public health and well-being issues as well, is that I play trombone in my local village band. And I actually think if people took up acoustic instruments and played them more, this would actually encourage them not only to integrate with other people in a way that music really does allow people to on a different level, but it's something that takes up large amounts of their time in a constructive and sort of well-being promoting manner. And that time, once spent and dedicated to learning how to play musical instruments better, is spent a lot less on energy intensive activities.
In terms of my energy story at home, I think what I'd like to do is champion the concept of laziness. I think laziness should be destigmatized, because it certainly works for me very well that as long as I get sat in the sofa while it's still light, the idea of then getting out of the sofa to turn the lights on once I'm doing something is too much, so I'll just stay there, and that is my efficiency. Stop laughing.
My brother-in-law was on a holiday or on a birthday celebration with us, and he was talking about LEDs, and it's terrible. It has the wrong light. It isn't light enough. it makes you sick. Well, the whole charade of what can you tell us about? And then he made a mistake. He said, take your light. That's good. That's what we should have. And then I made him very happy by telling, you're looking at LED light. And he's a good guy, so he changed his light bulbs at home. So that was my personal way of convincing somebody, but that's the way that I try to do it well at home.
I decided to do my best, and I replaced the double glazing by HR glazing. And well, actually now I still have the double glazing, and I consider even to put it in front of the glazing that's there already. So it will be 4 layers of glass. I'm not sure if I'm the first one in the Netherlands, but I really like to do some practical experiments in my own house.
So this weekend sometime I'm going to get a bicycle helmet, and I have access to a bicycle, and I'm going to see how it goes, and I'm going to see if I can get some colleagues involved in it too who, you know, haven't done that personal cycling challenge. And that's basically me.